I watched my husband load our 6-year-old daughter into his Bentley with birthday balloons and a custom cake. My birthday was today. The cake had another woman's name on it. He kissed my cheek and said, "Don't wait up, babe." That's when I knew I'd become invisible in my own marriage. Before I tell you how a forgotten birthday exposed a billion-dollar betrayal, hit that subscribe button. You'll want to follow every twist in this story. And drop a comment telling me, would you stay or would you go? Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Nia Thompson, and 3 years ago, I was living what everyone called the perfect life. My husband Gregory had just sold his tech company for $3.2 billion. We had the penthouse in Manhattan, the summer home in Martha's Vineyard, invitations to every charity gala that mattered. Our daughter Chloe was in the best private school in New York. On paper, I had everything. But here's what nobody tells you about marrying a billionaire. You can be surrounded by everything and still feel completely alone. Gregory was always gone, always on a call, always at a meeting, always building the next thing. And I told myself, that's just what ambitious men do, right? I told myself I was being supportive. I told myself that the loneliness was just the price of this life. I had given up my interior design firm when we got married. Gregory said he needed a partner who could focus on building our home, raising our daughter, representing us at social events. He made it sound like a promotion, like I was graduating from working woman to somebody's wife. And like a fool, I believed him. The morning of my 34th birthday, I woke up with that little flutter of excitement in my chest. You know the feeling. You're an adult, birthdays aren't supposed to matter anymore, but some part of you still hopes someone remembered, still hopes you matter enough to celebrate. Gregory's side of the bed was already cold. I found a note on his pillow, written in that hurried scrawl of his. Early meeting, love you. Not happy birthday. Not can't wait to celebrate tonight. Just early meeting, love you. I went downstairs and made Chloe her favorite breakfast. Chocolate chip pancakes shaped like butterflies. She was chattering about school, about her friend's new puppy, about everything except the fact that it was her mother's birthday. And I kept waiting for that moment when she'd grin and yell, "Happy birthday, Mommy." But it never came. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, moved through the kitchen like a ghost that morning. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. She'd been with us for 4 years, knew every detail of our lives, and suddenly she was acting like I was invisible. There was this strange energy in the house, this tension I couldn't name, like everyone knew something I didn't. Around 1 in the afternoon, I heard the front door open. Gregory never came home in the middle of the day, never. But there he was, and he was more animated than I'd seen him in months. His eyes were bright. He was almost bouncing. He looked happy, really, genuinely happy. Chloe ran to him squealing, and they huddled together, whispering and giggling like they were sharing the best secret in the world. And I remember standing there watching them, feeling this weird mix of joy and dread. It was beautiful to see him engaged with our daughter, but something felt wrong. Then I watched him start loading things into his car, pink and white balloons, elegantly wrapped gifts with real ribbon, the expensive kind, and a custom cake from that exclusive bakery in Tribeca, the one where you need to order 3 weeks in advance. My heart started pounding because I thought, for just 1 second, that maybe all of this was for me. That maybe he'd planned some elaborate surprise. I walked to the front door and stepped outside. That's when I saw it clearly. The name on the cake, written in perfect fondant script. "Happy birthday, Veronica." My stomach dropped so fast, I thought I might actually be sick right there in the driveway. I watched my husband, the man I'd built a life with, carefully place another woman's birthday cake in his car. Our daughter was already buckled in the back seat, holding a balloon. I walked up to him. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Whose birthday?" Gregory barely looked at me. He was checking his phone, typing something. "Oh, Veronica from work. Big milestone birthday. Thought it would be nice to celebrate. I'm taking Chloe. She absolutely loves Veronica." The casual way he said it, like it was the most normal thing in the world, like my daughter loving another woman was something I should be happy about. It's my birthday, Gregory. I watched his face, watched him check his phone calendar, watched the moment of recognition flash across his features. And you know what hurt the most? It wasn't shock, it wasn't horror, it was mild inconvenience. Oh damn, babe, is it today? He looked at me the way you'd look at someone who reminded you that you forgot to pick up milk. We'll celebrate tomorrow, I promise. But this is really important for the company. Veronica's been working 80-hour weeks. This matters. He kissed my cheek, actually kissed my cheek. Then he got in the car with our daughter and drove away to celebrate another woman's birthday on mine. I stood in that driveway for I don't know how long. The sun was bright. Birds were singing. The world was continuing like nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shattered. Not broken, shattered. There's a difference. Mrs. Patterson brought me tea an hour later. She set it down on the table next to me and finally looked me in the eye. What I saw there was pity. She knew. Of course, she knew. Everyone knew except me. I called my best friend, Tasha. She answered on the first ring. And before I could even speak, she said, "Please tell me you're not crying over that man on your birthday." I told her everything. The cake, the name, the fact that my husband chose another woman over me on my birthday and took our daughter to make it sting worse. Tasha didn't even pause. "Nia, you need to investigate. Now, tonight. This isn't about a birthday party. Men don't forget their wife's birthday to celebrate a colleague unless something else is happening. Check everything." After we hung up, I sat there with a question burning in my mind. Was this an affair, or was this something worse? That night, after Gregory texted me that he'd be late and not to wait up, I went into his home office. He'd always been secretive about that room. Password-protected computer, locked filing cabinets. He called it protecting company assets. I called it what it was now, hiding something. I started with the obvious places. Credit card statements were easy to find because Gregory was arrogant enough to think I'd never look. There, in black and white, were charges I'd never seen. A $15,000 necklace from Cartier, purchased 2 weeks ago. I never received a necklace. Dinner reservations at our favorite restaurants. The intimate ones where we used to celebrate anniversaries. Dates I wasn't invited to. Then I found the private jet manifests. Gregory told me he'd been in board meetings, Boston, Chicago, Denver. But the manifests told a different story. Aspen, Paris, Dubai, weekend trips to the most romantic cities in the world, while I was home with Chloe, believing his lies. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. A woman named Angela Bradford came recommended by Tasha's divorce attorney cousin. Angela had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. She looked me in the eye and said, "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to find the truth, but you need to be ready for what the truth might be." The photos came back 48 hours later. I sat in Angela's office while she slid a manila folder across her desk. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Veronica Hayes, 28 years old, blonde, beautiful in that effortless way that made me hate myself for even noticing. She was Gregory's chief operations officer, a title he'd created 6 months ago. In the photos, they were holding hands across a table at a restaurant. She was wearing the Cartier necklace. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me, back when I was still visible to him. But the birthday party photos were what destroyed me. There was Chloe, playing with Veronica, laughing with her head thrown back in pure joy. There was Gregory cutting the cake, surrounded by colleagues who all seemed to be in on this secret life he'd built. They looked like a family, a complete family. And I was the woman at home who'd been edited out. Angela wasn't done. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker. "Mrs. Thompson, it's worse than an affair. Over the next hour, she showed me everything. Gregory had been systematically transferring assets for over a year, money flowing into offshore accounts I'd never heard of. Veronica's name listed as beneficiary on new life insurance policies worth $20 million. Company shares being restructured through shell corporations. He wasn't just having an affair, he was planning to erase me financially. He was building a future that didn't include me, using money that was legally half mine. That night, Chloe came home full of stories. She told me all about Auntie Veronica's party, about the magician and the fancy cake, and the beautiful decorations. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Mommy, Daddy says Auntie Veronica might live with us soon. She's going to redecorate my room with me. Is that okay?" My baby girl was asking my permission for another woman to take my place. And she was asking innocently, sweetly, because she didn't understand what was happening. Because Gregory had been preparing her, grooming her to accept his replacement for me. I tucked her in that night, kissed her forehead, and made a decision. I was done being invisible. I was done being forgotten. I was done letting this man steal my life while I smiled and played the perfect wife. The next morning, I went back to Angela's office. She laid out my options. I'd married Gregory before the billions, which meant I was entitled to half of everything. But his hidden assets complicated things. The prenup I'd signed 8 years ago was based on false financial disclosure. He'd lied about what he was worth even back then. Angela smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who knew how to destroy men like Gregory in court. "We're going to take him apart legally, Mrs. Thompson. And when we're done, you're going to have enough money to build whatever life you want." I spent the next week gathering evidence. I documented everything, every lie, every hidden account, every romantic trip disguised as a business meeting. And in the quiet moments, usually in Chloe's room while she slept, I thought about who I used to be. Before Gregory, I had a thriving interior design firm. I was known for transforming spaces, for seeing potential where others saw nothing. I had friends I actually liked, not just people who moved in the right social circles. I had dreams that belonged to me, not to somebody's husband. I'd spent years making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I'd given up my business because Gregory needed a supportive wife. I'd cut off friends because they weren't sophisticated enough for his new circles. I'd stopped having opinions that contradicted his. I'd become a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of his success. No more. 3 weeks after the birthday incident, Gregory came home, late from another business dinner. I was waiting in his office, sitting in his chair. Every document Angela had gathered was spread across his desk. Bank statements, photos, text messages his IT guy had recovered. All of it. "We need to talk about Veronica," I said. My voice was calm, cold. "And your offshore accounts, and your plans to cut me out of everything we built together." I watched his face go pale, watched him try to calculate his next move. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to deny, to gaslight, to make me feel crazy for believing my own eyes. "My lawyer has everything," I continued. "Every transaction, every lie, every text message where you and Veronica planned your future. You have 24 hours to move out." He tried. Of course he tried. He told me I was overreacting, that Veronica meant nothing, that the money transfers were just smart business, that I was jeopardizing our family over a misunderstanding. He actually used the word misunderstanding, like I'd misunderstood him falling in love with another woman and planning to leave me with nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just sat there and waited for him to finish. Then I said, 23 hours and 58 minutes now. The divorce was brutal. Gregory fought for everything. He tried to claim the business he built during our marriage was separate property. He tried to hide more assets. He tried to make me look unstable, like a bitter ex-wife making things up. But Angela was better. We had proof of everything. His own arrogance had left a trail so obvious that even his expensive lawyers couldn't cover it up. The process took 14 months. 14 months of legal battles and depositions, and watching Gregory's face in courtroom after courtroom. But I won. I got majority custody of Chloe. I exposed his financial fraud, which cost him partnerships and board positions. And I walked away with an $847 million settlement. Want to know the best part? Veronica left him 3 months after his net worth dropped. Turns out, she loved the billionaire, not the man. Shocking, right? It's been 2 years now. I relaunched my interior design firm, and we're valued at $50 million. I design spaces for people who want to remember who they are, who want their homes to reflect their true selves instead of someone else's vision of success. Chloe is thriving. She understands now that her mommy is strong, that loving yourself isn't selfish, that you don't have to shrink to make room for someone else's ego. I'm dating again, but on my terms. I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I'm already complete. I'm looking for someone who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't ask me to fade. Looking back, that forgotten birthday wasn't the problem. It was just the moment I finally admitted what I'd known for years. I'd been forgotten long before that day. Every time Gregory chose a meeting over dinner with me, every time he planned a future that didn't include asking what I wanted, every time he made me feel selfish for wanting to be seen. The worst thing that happened to me became the catalyst for my best life. And I know that sounds like something from a greeting card. But it's true. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you actually need. If you're watching this and something in your gut is screaming that something's wrong, listen to it. You already know the truth. You're just afraid to admit it. And I understand that fear. Admitting the truth means everything changes. But staying comfortable in a lie will kill you slowly. It'll kill the person you were meant to be. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I share stories of survival, strength, and comeback every week. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt invisible in your own life? What did you do about it? Remember, you're never too deep in to turn around. You're just one decision away from a different life. I'm Nia, and I'll see you in the next one. They told me to wait outside, like I was the help. At my own husband's company event. See, when you marry a billionaire, people assume you're just arm candy. But what they didn't know, I built half his empire. And tonight, they were about to learn that lesson in the most expensive way possible. Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. And stick around until the end, because the karma that comes back around. Chef's kiss. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Gabrielle Washington. Well, it used to be Washington. For the past 6 years, I've been Gabrielle Blackstone, wife of Trevor Blackstone, billionaire CEO of Blackstone Technologies. Sounds glamorous, right? Like something out of a magazine. And for a while, it was. But let me tell you something about fairy tales. They never mention what happens after happily ever after. Trevor and I met when I was 28, working as a senior software developer at a small tech startup in Silicon Valley. I had just created something special, an AI algorithm that could predict user behavior with 98% accuracy. It was revolutionary, and Trevor knew it. His company acquired us for $50 million. But honestly, he was acquiring me. He saw my work, saw my potential, and he pursued me like his life depended on it. Flowers every day, late-night conversations about technology and dreams. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. I remember my grandmother pulling me aside that day, holding my hands in hers. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Baby, never forget who you are. Never let anyone make you small." I smiled and nodded, thinking it was just wedding day wisdom. I had no idea how much I'd need those words. The first few years were good, great, even. I continued developing software, and Trevor built his empire. My algorithm became the backbone of his company's 3 biggest products. We were partners in every sense of the word. But somewhere around year 4, things shifted. He got busier, more important meetings, more late nights at the office, more distance between us. And then came Candace. Candace was his new executive assistant, 26, blonde, ambitious, and she looked at me like I was an inconvenience every time I called Trevor's office. The cold tone in her voice when she'd say, "He's in a meeting, Mrs. Blackstone. I'll have him call you back," except he never did. Not anymore. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that successful men have demanding schedules, that I should be more understanding. But a woman knows. You feel it in your gut when something's wrong, when you've gone from being someone's priority to being someone's obligation. So when Trevor mentioned the annual investor gala at company headquarters, I decided I was going to show up and remind everyone, including him, exactly who Gabrielle Blackstone was. I spent all afternoon getting ready, got my hair done at that expensive salon in Beverly Hills, spent 2 hours on my makeup, wore this emerald green dress that cost more than my first car. I looked amazing. I felt powerful. I was ready. Trevor had left earlier that morning, said he needed to handle some last-minute details, told me to come separately, that he'd see me there. I should have known something was off, but I pushed the feeling down. I drove myself to the company building, the building where I'd spent countless hours, where my fingerprints were literally in the security system I helped design. This was my territory, too. The valet took my car, and I walked toward the entrance. I could hear music and laughter floating from inside. The lobby was glittering with lights and beautiful people in expensive clothes. I was walking up those marble steps, feeling like I belonged, when this security guard stepped in front of me. His name tag said Brad. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and he looked at me like I was trying to break in. "Excuse me, ma'am. Invitation, please." I smiled, polite but confident. "Oh, I left it in my car, but I'm Gabrielle Blackstone, Trevor's wife." He didn't even blink, just kept that stone face going. "I need to see an invitation, ma'am. No exceptions. Now, I've been to this building hundreds of times. Hundreds. But suddenly I'm being treated like a stranger." I took a breath, keeping my composure. "Look, I understand you're doing your job, but I've been here many times. I'm Trevor Blackstone's wife. Just call up to his assistant. She can verify." Brad pulled out his radio, and I heard him say, "Yeah, we've got a situation at the front entrance. Woman claiming to be Mr. Blackstone's wife." Claiming, like I was lying. Like I was some random woman off the street trying to crash a party. I felt my face getting hot, but I held it together. People were starting to stare. Other guests walking past, whispering, looking at me like I was causing a scene. Then Candace appeared, and I swear when she saw me standing there, I caught the smallest smirk on her face before she arranged it into fake concern. Oh my goodness, what seems to be the problem here? I looked at her, this woman who answered my husband's phone, who probably spent more time with him than I did lately. "Candace, can you please tell security who I am?" She tilted her head like she was thinking real hard. "Well, there seems to be a misunderstanding. Mr. Blackstone is in a very important meeting with investors right now. Perhaps it would be best if you waited outside until we can verify your identity. We've had some issues with people trying to get into these events." I felt like I'd been slapped. Waited outside? Verify my identity. I'm wearing a $15,000 dress and diamonds, standing at my husband's company, and this woman is suggesting I wait outside like I'm selling magazines door to door. 2 women walked past us right then, dripping in jewelry and judgment. One of them was Helen Cartwright, old money, board member's wife, and someone I'd met at least a dozen times. She looked right at me, whispered something to her friend, and they both laughed, not even trying to hide it. I pulled out my phone and called Trevor, straight to voicemail. Called again. This time, declined. I sent him a text. "I'm being stopped at security. Can you come down?" 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. Candace was still standing there with that sympathetic mask on. "Mrs. Blackstone, I really think it's best if you wait out here, or I'd be happy to call you an Uber if you'd prefer to go home and we can sort this all out tomorrow." An Uber. She wanted to send me home in an Uber from my own husband's event. Brad, the security guard, actually nodded along, like this was reasonable. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. You're blocking the entrance. You know what the worst part was? I wasn't even angry in that moment. I was humiliated, embarrassed, standing there in my expensive dress, being treated like I didn't belong, while everyone walked past me into the party where my husband was probably having the time of his life. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand to see him, to make a scene until someone listened. But then I heard my grandmother's voice in my head, clear as day. Baby, don't get mad, get even. So I smiled, calm as anything. You know what? You're absolutely right. I'll just head out. Thank you for your time. Candace looked almost disappointed, like she'd wanted more of a fight. Brad relaxed his shoulders. I turned around and walked back to my car with my head high. Even though inside I was breaking into 1,000 pieces, I sat in my car in that parking lot, hands shaking, mascara probably running, and I made a decision. See, what none of them knew, what Trevor had apparently forgotten, was that I wasn't just his wife. I was the woman who built the technology his entire empire was standing on. And I had never, not once, signed over the rights to my algorithm. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in almost a year. Lawrence Chen. He'd been my business partner at the startup before Trevor acquired us. Now he ran his own venture capital firm, and 6 months ago, he'd made me an offer. $500 million for my half of the proprietary AI code. I'd laughed it off then, told him I was married, and that code was family business now. But sitting in that parking lot, humiliated and dismissed, I realized something. That code wasn't family business. It was my business, my creation, my intellectual property that I'd been letting Trevor's company use, out of love and trust. Trust that he'd just let his assistant flush down the toilet. Lawrence picked up on the second ring. Gabriel, it's been a while. That offer, I said, my voice steady now. Is it still on the table? There was a pause. The licensing deal for your algorithm. Absolutely. Are you serious? Dead serious. How fast can you move? For you, I can have contracts drawn up by tomorrow morning. But Gabriel, are you sure? This will essentially shut down half of Blackstone Technologies' products until they renegotiate with you. I looked at the building where my husband was probably laughing and drinking champagne while I sat outside like trash. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We talked for 20 minutes. Lawrence explained that because I'd never formally transferred ownership of my code to Blackstone Technologies, they'd been operating under an informal spousal agreement, one that I could revoke at any time. And once I did, 3 of their biggest products would crash within 72 hours, unless Trevor came to the table. I pulled out my laptop from my car and started going through old contracts. Sure enough, there it was. My signature on the original patent. My name as the sole creator and owner. Trevor's company had a temporary license to use it, subject to my approval. An approval I'd given verbally, as his wife, but never legally. One email to my lawyer. That's all it took. Subject line: revoking technology license agreement. Effective 72 hours. I hit send and watched it disappear into the digital universe, about to create chaos I couldn't even imagine yet. But I wasn't done. I opened LinkedIn. I had about 200,000 followers in the tech industry. Developers, entrepreneurs, journalists, people who knew my work, even if they didn't know my face. I typed out a post, short and cryptic. Interesting evening. Sometimes you realize your value when others try to diminish it. Big announcement coming Monday. Stay tuned. Hashtag tech news. Hashtag know your worth. Posted. Within 5 minutes, I had 300 likes. Tech journalists were already sliding into my DMs asking what was happening. I didn't respond. Let them wonder. Let the speculation build. Inside that gala, Trevor must have been having the time of his life. I pictured him in his custom tuxedo, working the room, shaking hands with investors. Maybe Candace was by his side, whispering in his ear, making him laugh. Maybe he hadn't even noticed I never made it inside. Maybe he didn't care. His CFO, Preston, would have noticed though. Preston was smart, always checking his phone, always on top of every detail. And when my LinkedIn post started blowing up, when tech blogs started speculating about what Gabrielle Blackstone's big announcement could be, Preston would have felt that first flutter of panic. I imagine him walking over to Trevor, pulling him aside from whatever investor he was charming, showing him his phone, watching Trevor's face go from confused to concerned to absolutely pale, because Trevor knew, the moment he saw that post, he knew exactly what I was capable of. He just never thought I'd actually do it. My phone started ringing. Trevor. I watched it buzz in my hand, once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. A text came through. "Where are you? We need to talk, now." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove home, took off that emerald dress, and put on my black power suit, the one I wore to board meetings back when I still worked. I redid my makeup, this time sharper, more severe, pulled my hair back into a sleek bun. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked powerful, dangerous, ready for war. My phone was exploding now. 15 missed calls from Trevor, 8 from Preston, even one from Candace, which I found almost funny. My lawyer called to confirm the license revocation was filed. Lawrence called to say the contracts were being rushed through. Everything was in motion. The dominoes were falling. Then I saw the news alert. Blackstone Technologies, stock drops 15% in after-hours trading, amid technology ownership questions. It was happening. The market was reacting. Investors were panicking. And somewhere in that glittering gala, Trevor's perfect night was crumbling around him. I got back in my car and drove back to company headquarters. It was almost 10 at night now. The party was still going, but there was an energy shift I could feel even from the parking lot. Frantic, tense. When I walked back up to that entrance in my power suit, Brad the security guard actually looked nervous. "Ma'am, I held up my hand. "I'm here for the emergency board meeting." "I assume it's already started." He looked confused. "I wasn't informed of any." I pulled out my phone and showed him a document my lawyer had just sent over. "I own 40% of this company through a trust established when Trevor and I got married. A trust that he apparently forgot about when he restructured last year. So unless you want to physically remove a major shareholder from entering her own building, I suggest you step aside." Brad stepped aside. I walked through those doors, past the coat check, past the catering staff, straight into that ballroom where 300 people in tuxedos and gowns were now clustered in anxious groups, all staring at their phones. The music had stopped, the laughter was gone, and when I walked in, everyone turned to look at me. You could have heard a pin drop. Trevor was across the room, surrounded by Preston and several board members. His tie was loose, his hair was messed up, like he'd been running his hands through it. And when he saw me, he actually looked relieved, like I was there to fix this, like I was going to save him the way I always had. He started walking toward me. "Gabby, thank God, listen, there's been a huge misunderstanding." "You're right," I said, cutting him off. My voice was calm, clear, and loud enough for people nearby to hear. "There has been a misunderstanding. You misunderstood who I am, what I'm worth, and what I'm willing to accept." Candace appeared out of nowhere, trying to step between us. "Mrs. Blackstone, perhaps we should discuss this privately." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. The fear in her eyes. She knew she'd messed up. She'd played a stupid game and was about to win a really stupid prize. "You're fired," I said simply. "Effective immediately. Security, please escort her out." The irony was not lost on anyone in that room. Candace's face went red, then white. She looked at Trevor, waiting for him to defend her. He didn't even look at her. He was too busy trying to figure out how to fix the bomb I'd just dropped on his entire company. Gabrielle, Trevor said, and his voice was shaking. We need to talk. Privately. Please. No, I said. We're going to talk right here, with the board. Because this isn't a marriage conversation anymore, Trevor. This is business. Preston appeared with a tablet, showing Trevor something that made him close his eyes, like he was in pain. The stock price, probably. Or maybe the legal documents my lawyer had filed. Or maybe just the realization that he'd pushed the wrong woman too far. Helen Cartwright, that woman who'd laughed at me earlier, approached us. Her face was serious now. Mrs. Blackstone, is it true that you own the core algorithm that runs our 3 primary products? It is, I said, meeting her eyes. And as of 72 hours from now, Blackstone Technologies no longer has the license to use it, unless we can come to new terms. You could hear the collective gasp in the room. Investors started heading for the exits. Phones were ringing everywhere. The party was officially over. We moved to the boardroom. Me, Trevor, Preston, 5 board members, and both our lawyers. It was midnight before we even started talking real numbers. Trevor tried everything, apologizing, explaining, begging, telling me he loved me, and that Candace was nothing, and that tonight was all a terrible mistake. But here's the thing about being humiliated like that. Once you see how little someone values you, you can't unsee it. Once you've been told to wait outside at your own husband's event, treated like you're nobody, dismissed like you're worthless, you don't forget that. And you sure don't forgive it without consequences. My terms were simple. $800 million for the perpetual license to use my algorithm, a seat on the board of directors with full voting rights, complete restructuring of company culture, including mandatory bias training, and a diversity initiative with real teeth. And Trevor, he'd be stepping down as CEO, not leaving the company but taking a lesser role. President of operations. Someone else would run his empire now. He looked at me across that conference table like I'd stabbed him. You're taking my company. No, I said. I'm taking what's mine. What I built. What I should have protected years ago. You just forgot that your empire was built on my foundation. The board voted, unanimous. They didn't have a choice, really. Without my technology, Blackstone Technologies would lose billions. With it, they'd survive, thrive even. The price didn't matter. They'd have paid anything. We signed the papers at 2 in the morning. Trevor's signature was shaky. Mine was firm and clear. When it was done, I stood up, collected my copies, and walked toward the door. Gabrielle, Trevor called after me. Are we going to be okay? I turned back to look at him. This man I'd loved for 6 years. This man who'd swept me off my feet and then forgotten to value what he'd found. No, Trevor. We're not. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce. Over this? Over one night. No, I said. Over every night you chose not to see me, not to value me, not to protect me. Tonight was just the first time I chose to see it clearly. I walked out of that boardroom, out of that building, into the cool night air. My phone buzzed. A text from my grandmother. Proud of you, baby. I smiled. For the first time that night, I genuinely smiled. 3 months later, I'm co-CEO of Blackstone Technologies. Trevor reports to me now. Though we barely speak, the company's stock is higher than ever. Candace, last I heard, she's working at a call center in Nevada. Brad, the security guard, went through sensitivity training and kept his job, which was more grace than he deserved. But I'm not about ruining lives unnecessarily. Helen Cartwright publicly apologized to me in the Wall Street Journal and donated $1 million to an organization supporting Black women in tech. Trevor and I are separated, divorce pending. My lawyer says I'll walk away with about half his fortune, which feels poetic considering I built half of it anyway. But the money isn't the victory. The company isn't the victory. The victory is knowing my worth. It's looking in the mirror and seeing a woman who refused to accept disrespect, who took the humiliation and turned it into power, who waited outside when they told her she didn't belong, and came back in, wearing her crown. They thought they were putting me in my place. Turns out, my place was at the top. And that's how you handle disrespect, with grace and a good lawyer. The lesson here: never underestimate a Black woman who knows her worth and has the receipts to prove it. If this story spoke to you, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me what would you have done in Gabrielle's shoes. Subscribe for more stories about karma, justice, and women who refuse to be diminished. Until next time, remember your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Peace. I watched my husband smirk as I signed those papers with shaking hands. He thought he'd won, thought his billions and that young secretary meant he could discard me like trash. But karma, she doesn't forget. And when she came for him, that smirk died real quick. Let me tell you how. Before I tell you how this man went from laughing in my face to crying at my doorstep, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Trust me, you'll want to hear every single word of what happened next. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. The lawyer's office was cold that day. Not just temperature cold, but soul cold. You know what I mean. That kind of sterile environment where life-changing moments happen, but nobody really cares because it's just another Tuesday for them. I sat across from my husband of 10 years, and he had this look on his face, this smirk, like he'd just won the lottery, and I was the losing ticket he was about to throw away. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely hold the pen. 10 years of my life, about to end with a signature, and he just sat there, looking at his phone, probably texting her. That expensive pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Each page I turned, each line I initialed, I kept thinking about how we got here. How did the man who used to look at me like I hung the moon become this stranger who couldn't even pretend to care that I was falling apart right in front of him? Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what I lost, or what I thought I lost. We met 12 years ago at a community center. I was a nurse working double shifts at the county hospital, and he was this dreamer with a laptop and big ideas about changing the tech world. Everyone thought he was crazy. His own family had written him off. But me? I saw something in him. I believed in his vision when nobody else would. I remember those early days so clearly. I'd come home from a 16-hour shift, feet aching, back hurting, and I'd find him at my tiny kitchen table, surrounded by papers and coffee cups. He'd talk for hours about algorithms and platforms and disrupting industries. Half the time I didn't understand the technical stuff, but I understood passion. I understood dreams. So I worked more shifts, picked up weekend work, holiday pay. Every extra dollar I made went into his vision. My savings account, the one I'd been building since I was 16, the one that was supposed to be for our future, for a house, for kids maybe. I emptied it. $23,000. Every penny went into renting his first office space, buying equipment, paying developers. He promised me we were building this together. He'd say, "Baby, when this takes off, it's all ours. You and me. Everything I build is for us." I believed him. God, I believed every word. Then it happened. His company took off. Not slowly, but like a rocket. One investor led to another. His app went viral. Suddenly, we were going from my small apartment to a house, then from a house to a mansion. The money started flowing in, and our lives changed overnight. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about success. It changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they really were all along. He needed me to quit nursing. "Babe, I need you managing things at home. I've got investors to meet, conferences to attend. I need you handling everything else." So I did. I put my career on hold. No, let me be honest. I didn't put it on hold. I gave it up. There's a difference. I became his personal assistant, his event planner, his housekeeper, his everything. I organized dinner parties for people who looked through me like I was furniture. I smiled and played hostess while they talked business and I served drinks. Late nights became normal. He'd call at 9, 10, 11 at night. "Don't wait up, baby." Big meeting running long. I'd sit in that big empty house, dinner getting cold, wondering when I became an afterthought. Our friends, or what I thought were our friends, they were all from his world now. Tech people, money people, people who'd never worked a hospital shift in their lives, never held someone's hand while they took their last breath, never understood what real work meant. Then came her, his secretary, 24 years old, long legs, and ambitious eyes, the kind of woman who knows exactly what she wants and exactly how to get it. It started small. Working late became his new normal. The smell of perfume I didn't wear started lingering on his clothes. Lipstick shades I'd never owned showed up on his collar. When I'd ask about it, he'd get defensive. "You're being paranoid. I'm building an empire. This is what it takes." But I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. The hotel receipt I found in his pocket wasn't for a business conference. It was for a Tuesday night, 20 minutes from our house. When I confronted him, you know what he said? He didn't even try to lie. He just looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "You've gotten boring. I need someone who understands my world now. Someone who fits into this life. Someone who fits." Like I was a piece of furniture that didn't match the decor anymore. Like I wasn't the woman who believed in him when he had nothing. Like my money, my sacrifices, my years didn't matter because I didn't look good in his new world. The divorce happened fast. His lawyers were sharks, and I couldn't afford anyone nearly as good. The settlement was insulting. A small amount that wouldn't even cover a year's expenses. Nothing compared to the empire that I helped build. They made sure of it. Somehow all those bank transfers, all that evidence of my investment, it got buried in legal language I couldn't fight. Moving day broke something in me. I stood in his mansion, with one suitcase. One. That's all I left with. Everything else stayed. The furniture I'd picked out, the art I'd chosen, the home I'd built. My sister came to help me move into a tiny apartment across town. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? I cried on the floor of that empty living room, and she just held me while I fell apart. The next few months were dark, really dark. I'd scroll through social media and see pictures of them. Him and her at charity galas, at tech conferences, at restaurants I used to go to. She was wearing clothes I couldn't afford anymore, living the life I'd built. And everyone was commenting how perfect they looked together, how happy he seemed, like I'd never existed. My friends from our married life disappeared. Turns out they were his friends who tolerated me. The group chats went quiet. The invitations stopped. I was erased. Depression crept in like fog. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. Who was I without him? Who was I without that life? I'd defined myself by being his wife for so long that I'd forgotten I was somebody before him. Then one day, I ran into an old friend from nursing school at the grocery store. She hugged me tight and said, "Girl, I've missed you. Where have you been?" We got coffee, and I told her everything. She listened, really listened, and then she said something that changed everything. "You were the best nurse in our class. You had fire. You had purpose. What happened to her?" That question haunted me. What happened to her? I'd buried her, hidden her away to make room for his dreams. But she was still there, underneath all that pain and disappointment. So I made a decision. I enrolled in a nursing recertification program. It was hard, going back after years away. The medical field had changed, new procedures, new technology. But you know what? I loved it. Every difficult moment reminded me I was capable. I was smart. I was valuable outside of being someone's wife. Going back to work in scrubs felt like coming home. Those long shifts that used to exhaust me now felt purposeful. I was helping people again, making a real difference. And slowly, I started feeling like myself. The real me, not the woman who'd shrunk herself to fit into someone else's world. Then I started digging. Late at night, I'd go through old files, old emails, old bank statements I'd kept copies of. Every transfer I'd made, every contribution I'd given, every sacrifice that got erased. I documented everything. Found conversations where he'd acknowledged my investment. Found emails where he'd promised me partnership. Found proof that I'd been written out of the story of his success. That's when karma started doing her work. News broke that his company was facing a major lawsuit, fraud allegations, financial irregularities. The stock price dropped 40% in one day. Then came the really beautiful part. That secretary he'd left me for, she married him quick, real quick, within 6 months of our divorce. And exactly 3 months after that wedding, she filed for divorce. Turns out she'd been embezzling from the company. Millions of dollars, gone. But it got better. She'd been working with his former business partner, the man he'd pushed out of the company 2 years earlier. They'd planned the whole thing, got married so she could access everything, cleaned out accounts, and ran. The prenup he'd rushed through to marry her, it gave her half of everything. He was financially destroyed. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I got promoted to head nurse in my unit, started a support group for divorced women at my church. We met every Tuesday night, and I watched women who'd been broken piece themselves back together. Local news did a feature on our group, on me, on how I'd turned my pain into purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, really living. That's when the text started. Can we talk? I deleted it. Then flowers showed up at the hospital. Expensive ones. I gave them to patients who needed something beautiful to look at. He showed up in the parking lot after my shift one night. Security escorted him away after I called them. I had nothing to say to him, but he didn't stop. 3 months of messages, gifts, showing up places. Then one evening, he appeared at my apartment building. The doorman called me, and I almost said to send him away. But something told me to face this, to close this chapter properly. When I came downstairs, I barely recognized him. The designer suits were gone. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down and jeans that had seen better days. His face looked older, tired, like he'd aged 10 years in 2. The confident, smirking man who'd signed those divorce papers was gone. This man looked broken. "Please," he said. "Just 5 minutes." I gave him 3. We sat on a bench outside my building, and he talked. Told me how he'd lost everything, how the company was bankrupt, how he was working a regular job now, trying to rebuild, how he realized too late that I was his foundation, that everything good he'd built had been because of me, because of my support, my belief, my sacrifices. He cried, real tears, begging for forgiveness, saying he'd never stopped loving me, that he'd been stupid, prideful, blind, that he needed me, needed my business sense, my strength, my heart, promised it would be different this time. I let him finish, sat there quiet while he poured out his regrets. Then I spoke. I told him about every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd deferred, every time I'd made myself smaller so he could be bigger. I told him about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep in that mansion while he was out with her, about how worthless he'd made me feel, about the years of my life I'd never get back. Then I pulled out an envelope. Inside were copies of every document, every bank transfer, every email that proved my financial contribution to his company. "My lawyer will be contacting you," I said. "You owe me, legally, and I'm going to make sure I get what's rightfully mine." The panic in his eyes was something I'll never forget. He realized I could take what little he had left, that I had evidence that could bury him. "This isn't about revenge," I told him. "It's about justice. It's about claiming what was always mine." He tried to argue, to negotiate, but I was done. I stood up and walked away, left him sitting on that bench, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. 6 months later, the settlement came through. A real settlement this time. My lawyers fought hard, and the evidence was undeniable. I got back my initial investment plus interest, got a percentage of the company's remaining value, got a public acknowledgement of my contributions to his success. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the principle, about making sure my story wasn't erased. I used some of that money to open my own nursing consultation business, helping other nurses advocate for themselves, negotiate better contracts, know their worth. The rest I invested wisely, built something that was truly mine. I even started dating again, met someone through a friend. He's a teacher, makes a regular salary, drives a regular car, lives a regular life. And he treats me like I'm extraordinary, looks at me the way my ex-husband used to before success changed him. Maybe better, because this man knew me as I am now. Strong, independent, whole. Last month, I saw my ex-husband at a coffee shop. He was sitting alone, working on a laptop like he used to 12 years ago. Full circle. He's working a regular job now, trying to rebuild from scratch. Humbled, changed, maybe. He looked up, and our eyes met. There was a moment of recognition, a brief nod. Then I kept walking, because he wasn't my concern anymore. His journey wasn't mine to worry about. Standing here now, looking back on everything, I realized that smirk, that awful smirk on his face when I signed those papers, it was a gift. It freed me, showed me who he really was, pushed me to find myself again. Karma didn't just punish him. She rewarded me with something better. Peace, purpose, self-worth that nobody can take away. You can't build someone else at your own expense. You can't sacrifice who you are for someone who doesn't value you. And you definitely can't let someone else's betrayal define your worth. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. Your value isn't determined by someone who couldn't see it. Remember that. Write it down. Tattoo it on your heart. Because when you know your worth, when you really know it deep in your soul, nobody can take it from you. Not with their words, not with their actions, not with their new relationships, or their money, or their success. Karma isn't about revenge. It's about balance. It's about truth eventually rising to the surface. And while he was falling apart, I was building myself back up. That's the real victory. Not his downfall, but my rise. That smirk haunted me for months, but it taught me something valuable. Your worth isn't determined by someone who couldn't see it. If this story touched you, if you've been where I was, or you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Drop a comment telling me your story, and subscribe, because I'm not done telling these truths. Remember, they'll regret you when karma comes calling. But by then, you'll be too busy living your best life to care. Stay strong, stay blessed, and never let anyone dim your light. Peace.